Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host for the CEO Project, for the Lazy CEO podcast, and I'm the founder of the CEO Project. So today, we're going to talk about executive gravitas. And, you hear this word bounced around, a lot of times in developmental conversations, or even just somebody saying, gee, I wish I had a bit more, executive gravitas. And I want to get into what does it mean and why do you care, and, how to develop it, how to provide more gravitas. So, if I just substituted the words confidence, trust, credibility for executive gravitas, that's really what we're talking about here. It is the ability for somebody to walk in a room and in a group and establish that they have confidence, that people should trust them, and that what they say is credible. And what's funny is this is not about your content. And so we're going to get into that in a minute, but it's not just content. There are people, and not my background's engineering, they would say, hey, better idea wins. It doesn't matter all that other junk that you're talking about. It's about the good ideas, and that's all that should really matter. And you'd wish, but it's just not true. So let's just go briefly to the dark side of executive gravitas. People use the techniques and methodologies that I'm going to talk about in a minute for negative purposes as well. And we've probably all experienced that at one point or another in our lives. But the words you'd put around those might be posturing, dominance, self-importance. And like any good thing, taken to an extreme, it can turn into a bad thing. And I would say that's sort of, the dark side of the force with regard to executive gravitas. People overuse it as a way to, position, if you will. And I remember I had a guy I worked with, this is years ago, but he had the whole package, right? He was tall, his hair was just slightly gray, he had the right educational background, he wore the suit well, he spoke well, he had awesome PowerPoint slides, and the guy didn't do anything. He got nothing done, but man, he looked the part, right? So, that was just self-importance, right? So the content wasn't there in that case. And that's what people call empty suits, right? The suit looks good, but there's nothing inside it. I think that the biggest thing here is just confidence as the first element of executive gravitas. So you have to have a level of confidence in what you're saying that it matters and it has weight. That can be overamped a little bit, but I think when I say that to people, they go, well, gee, Jim, I struggle with that. And I'm going to tell you a little secret. Everybody does. Everybody questions whether they're the right person in the role, whether they're the right person at the time. We all have a level of imposter syndrome that we go, oh my God, I was born this guy in New Jersey and here I am. This doesn't make any sense to me why I'm in this place and why me. So you got to get past that a little bit. And I think part of the problem is with confidence is what I would call poor referent groups. In other words, when we're considering if we're any good or not, we look at people that are extraordinary. And we go, look at that woman, look at that guy. They're so much smarter and so much better. And I'm no Steve Jobs. Well, geez, nobody's another Steve Jobs. But if you compare yourself to the population, or even the population doing what you do, I imagine if you're doing well in life, you're probably exceptionally good at what you do. I mean, there is largely a meritocracy in business. And so good moves up over time, generally, not in every case, but generally. So I think being true to yourself, being authentic, and having some confidence that you belong here is the first step in executive gravitas. So I've seen people that, that really have all the chops. They've got all the credentials and ability and accomplishments, and they don't believe in themselves. And it comes across in a lot of subtle ways that's a problem. So you really have to start with, I belong here. I'm supposed to be here. I don't mean take it for granted. I don't mean arrogance. I just mean like I earned the right to be here and therefore I belong, and just have some confidence in that. So a lot of the other elements around executive gravitas show up as more surface elements. And I said before, content matters. So you cannot be all surface. So think of this as taking a delicious cake and putting the right kind of frosting on it so everybody gets excited, or the right kind of decoration on it so everybody eats it. It's not like it's a crappy cake and we made it look fancy. You've got to actually have content underneath the icing. So the first element to think about is verbal. So verbal is super important. I'm going to tell you that people judge you, judge your intelligence, judge your gravitas based on your verbal skill. So the more skilled you are verbally, the higher they will estimate your abilities. I used to spend a lot of time in England, and I said, because you've all got that fancy accent, we think you're all got about 10 IQ points more than you really have. And, they sound so elegant and fabulous. And some of them are not as bright as they sound like they are, but they sound fabulous. So we do assess this on language. So the first element there is clean, positive language is really important. And what that means is, you got to drop the F-bomb. And there are people that are really comfortable. And I admit once in a while I will do it, but I do try to avoid it as much as I possibly can. So it's not appropriate, particularly in a corporate environment. You got to have a clean, positive language. So if you have a proclivity towards using, dirty words, then, up your vocabulary and find some other words to use. The other element there, beyond foul language, is verbal crutches. So we all have verbal crutches. Everybody knows about the and the but and the whatnot that they put into their speech patterns. But some people have like catchphrases that they use all the time. And it is not meant to provide an incremental information. It's simply a crutch to give you more time to think. And you need to get those out of your language. And you might react and say, well, gee, Jim, I've heard that for speeches, but is that true kind of all the time? And the answer is yes, because verbal crutches over time dilute your meaning. I have a person I work with, a female, and she uses, do you see what I mean? She uses it all the time. Or if you know what I mean, at the end of almost every phrase she says. And it's a throwaway phrase to give her time to think about the next thing she's going to say. So you need to get rid of crutch phrases. Here's the problem. You don't even know what they are. So you need to have somebody else listen to you, maybe record yourself at a meeting or something like that, and have them listen to your speech pattern and say, look for verbal crutches in my speech. And I guarantee you, we all have a couple of verbal crutches that we use that they'll go, you say all the time. You go, really? I go, yeah. You don't even know you're saying it right now. So get rid of the verbal crutches. The other one is be careful on the idioms. Now, I use them sometimes. I use, phraseology that people will not understand or expect on purpose, intentionally, with a view towards making them think. And it's usually a different way of looking at something or a different way of calling something, but just be careful of overuse of those things, because for clear communication, you don't want to confuse your audience unless you mean to. In that case, I mean to. So I do it on that for that reason. And then the last element here is just the talk listen ratio. There's an old saying that goes, you can either keep your mouth shut and make people think you're stupid, or you can open your mouth and you can confirm it. Now, and I'm not accusing anybody of being stupid, but if you watch people in positions of power, they speak relatively little, they question and they listen a fair amount, and they speak when they need to, they speak when it's important. People that lack power, that lack gravitas, speak either to hear themselves speak or to prove something, like, let me prove how smart I am, or let me prove that my position is valuable, or some other reason that they're speaking. or frankly, because they can't tolerate dead air. So they have to speak. They have to fill the space with words. I've talked about that in negotiation strategy before. So questions are more powerful than talking when you want to have executive gravitas. Part of the reason why is questions are more useful in trying to convince somebody of a point of view. Well, if you did that, what would happen? What would happen to our employees if we went down this path? How do you think they'd feel about not getting the Christmas bonus? Right? I mean, it's pretty clear you could convince somebody with questions, even though you have a view, and that is actually the more powerful way. Really great salespeople, for example, ask a lot of questions, and they do that because they know that's the better way to convince somebody of an issue. It's also conversation control. If I'm asking questions, I'm in control of the conversation. If I'm responding, right, I'm no longer in control. If I'm speaking, I'm not in control. You might think you are, but actually the questioner is in control of the conversation more than the person speaking. Think about, Barbara Walters doing an interview. Who was in control of that conversation? Barbara was, not whoever she was interviewing. So that's verbal, clean, positive, idioms, questions, all really important. If you don't think you have the vocabulary, there are ways to grow your vocabulary over time. I'll give you an example. I do a word every day in a dictionary, and I've got a decent vocabulary, but every once in a while there's a word I go, that's a really good word. I may try to use that today if I can. There are days I cannot use the crazy word they gave me in the dictionary, but that's okay. The second is vocal, and this is the use of your voice. Actors and actresses and singers, they all know this already, that the power of your voice is real. The first one is tone. So that is, do you speak up here or do you speak down here? I coached a woman a few years ago, and she was a very, to use a Jerry Seinfeld, she was a high talker. So she spoke way up here, she had a little squeaky voice. My conversation with her was like, look, you have to bring your voice down. That, I knew she could, but when she would get excited, when she's talking to people, her voice would go up a few tones, and it would lack weight. Told her to drop her voice, drop her tone, and it actually really helped in terms of people taking her serious. The second is pace and speed. So the other thing that this particular person was doing is she spoke really fast. When she got in front of you, she talked like this. Boy, she wanted to talk about all the things she had in her brain. She wanted to get them out before you could say anything because she's afraid you're going to interrupt her, and then you were going to take it. Like, when somebody's speaking with that level of rapidity, and she did it because she lacked the confidence to have genuine conversation. She was worried you would dismiss her before she got her thoughts out. So the confidence caused her to speak in a way that caused people not to give her, to take her seriously. So it kind of looped up upon itself. So the other thing I coached her on was slow it down. And for somebody that speaks quickly, naturally, slowing it down like that is painful. In fact, I told her, you need to speak so slowly that you are in pain speaking so slowly. Like you think everybody around you is dumb. And I'm going to tell you that if you're a fast speaker and you slow it down that much, you'll only be talking like a normal human being. It won't actually, it'll feel horrible to you. It will actually be normal to everybody around you. And even more, within the space is the use of pauses. So I've been doing it through this entire conversation, that I've stopped to make points as I go through the conversation. Really high level executives, and you see them speak, they're very comfortable pausing for emphasis, to make people think about something, to make a point. So pauses, not talking, is just as important as talking. So when you've got this continuous flow of information and I'm talking like this and there's no pauses in it at all and you can't really understand what the heck I'm saying, that lacks weight compared to me saying I could use the same exact words. When I speak quickly, it's difficult for people to take me seriously. So what you need to do is slow down, pause, and say what you have to say. So that has a whole different level of weight than the first phrase that I did, only because I added pauses and intonation to it. So the use of pauses is really, really important. I think the other thing vocally is to use people's name. Now, I'm a bit of a fan of Dale Carnegie, but not an over fan of his. He said that the sweetest thing that people hear is their own voice. And you've all dealt with people, they go, gee, Jim, it's so nice you're here, Jim. Nice weather, Jim. They overuse your name. I think of using somebody's name more like a little bit of salt on top of the meal, a little bit of flavor on top of the meal, not the meal. Some people use it like it's the meal, and I'm going to say your name as many times as humanly possible in this conversation because I read Dale Carnegie, and that's what he said you should do. So I do like to do it, because I think it builds a little connection, but also, frankly, because sometimes I struggle to remember names. It helps me remember their name when I'm saying their name and looking in their face multiple times. So say their name, 3 times, 4 times in a conversation, more than enough. Don't do 20 times, but a name is really super important as well. So that's verbal and your word choice and how you speak. Let's go to visual, because visual is also very important. Now, some people say, well, gee, that's not fair. It's all about the ideas. No, unfortunately, people assess you based on how you show up, how you appear. Let's start at the top. You need to be well groomed. And I don't mean like $1,000 haircut or anything, but a decent haircut. For guys, if you got a beard, it's got to be trimmed or shaved. Women, don't lay the makeup on with a spatula. Elegantly, appropriately done makeup is awesome. Or no, if you can get none, if you can get away with that. So well groomed, fingernails, all that. Now, I don't mean be a dandy. I don't mean like go crazy on this. I don't mean like foo-foo, but like just clean. Maybe the way to say this is it's at a level that nobody notices, right? They don't go, oh my gosh, she was so together. Like that's one level, but like she looked nice or he looked fine, right? That's the level we're looking for. You don't want to go to the other side. And I've had conversations with people, like there's one guy I was dealing with recently, and he said, I've got this COO and he's got a big bushy beard. He looks like ZZ Top. It is the single distinguishable feature about this guy. He's got this giant bushy beard, and it's very difficult for people to take him serious. Now, if that's your thing, I'm all good. Like you be you. All I'm telling you is that there are people that will view that and assess you a certain way, maybe incorrectly. And if you're okay with that, then groovy. You be you. But if you want to sort of manipulate how people react to you a little bit through appearance, this is one of the things to think about. The last one, I'll say it just because it needs to be said, is smell. You need to either smell neutral or lightly positive, if you will. Don't overdo it. And sure as heck, don't underdo it. I've got a friend that I play soccer with, and he uses, I think instead of a shower some days, he uses perfume. So when I'm playing soccer with him, he can be 10 yards behind me. I can smell him coming. He like that much. Like he takes a bath in this stuff. And like he's probably going a little heavy with the perfume, in my personal estimation. And frankly, in most cultures, I would say most Western cultures, that's too much. There are other cultures where that's just fine, but generally not in Western cultures. Also, in terms of dress, let's go to colors. So this is going to sound really boring. And for those of you that are creative, you're going to hate me a little bit. But here are the colors that you should wear if you want to evoke power or evoke gravitas. Gray, blue, black. Sorry, kids. For those that love orange, this is a problem. Why? I don't know what's going on in people's brains, but those colors communicate power. And what about brown? I'll give you, Reagan had a comment for brown suits, although he wore them once in a while because he could get away with it. But he called it the color of indecision was brown. So I have a brown jacket. I don't wear it very often because that little thought runs through my head all the time. But if you look at like Hollywood casting of somebody in power, male or female, you look at what color they're wearing. Gray, black, blue. That's it. Once in a great while, you get somebody because they're trying to make a point with a different color, but it subliminally communicates power to everybody when they see somebody in those colors. Now, you can put a splash of color in with a tie or a scarf or maybe a blouse or something, but the fundamental palette should be fairly neutral, fairly powerful. If you think about what airline pilots wear, what cops wear, blue, gray, black. Why? Because it communicates gravitas. It evokes confidence in the guy or gal sitting in the front of the plane because the color of the uniform they're wearing. That is super intentional. So if you are all about the green, just realize that people will have a reaction to green that may or may not want to be. Now, there are people that go, green is my signature color and I do it really elegantly and it works. I'm like, you know what? There are people in this world that can get away with that. For example, my happy shirt color is purple. I like purple. I think it's a fun color. It's not particularly a serious color, but that's okay. That's me. And if you don't like it, that's okay. But for most of us, we can't get away with orange. We can't get away with green, except on St. Patrick's Day. So think muted, formal colors, generally speaking. And I'm not talking suits, but even just your sweater or be a little more serious. Women have a little more latitude here, I'll admit. You will see women in positions of power that go right for these colors, like no messing around. I'll give up my opportunity to dress in something a little more interesting, to communicate power. That's a choice. Women got a little more latitude here, but you got to be careful in this dress thing. So the next one is physical. And we start with the handshake. And a handshake should be firm, don't try to crush anybody's knuckles, just a firm, solid handshake. Wait till they engage, web of the thumb to web of the thumb, then shake their hands. I've got people that they go early and they're gripping your fingers. And for me, interesting enough, a handshake communicates a lot about a person. When you go early and you grip somebody's finger, you're not thinking about them, you're thinking about yourself. You're also pulling a little bit of a dominance move on the other party by trying to grab their fingers because they can't really respond with a proper handshake. I'll give you the worst time ever, and I still remember, it was 20 years ago. I had a guy that he was going in to shake my hand, and he turned his hand over, so his hand was on top, shaking my hand. So we're kind of horizontal on the handshake instead of vertical, if you will. Total dominance move, and I said I'm not supposed to use foul language, but it was a jerk move. Let me just say it that way. That wasn't the foul choice. And I remember it to this day because it was such a jerk move. So don't do that. When you shake hands, look them in the hand and the eyes, say their name. Smile if you can get away with that. I'll give you a quick story. I taught my kids to do this early days. I said, look, when you meet somebody, and they were like 6, 7, I have one son who's a little more money motivated. And I said, look, when you meet somebody, I want you to look them in their eyes, shake their hand. And you got to tell me the color of their eyes after you shake their hands. And if you do, I'll give you $1. Well, we had somebody come to the house, my younger son, who it is, shook the individual's hands, looks up in the eyes, and then turns to me, puts his palm out and says, blue. Like, time to pay up, Dad. So don't do that. But the idea is that if you genuinely look at, because most people are so busy, they don't take the time to actually look at somebody to see who they are. And for me, that's the opportunity to associate some feature in their face with their name. Hi, Sharon. And then I associate some feature of Sharon, so I remember who the heck she is. So handshake. The next one is proximity. So, Seinfeld had a whole shtick on this, but the appropriate distance to be from somebody in Western America is about an arm's length distance. One arm's length, not both of you arms. Your arm out. They should be that far away from you. Now, if you want to do something conspiratorial or you want to imply that it's important, you can lean in and talk about something. But generally speaking, arm's length, male or female, both. That's how far away you should be. That is a respectful, appropriate, yet intimate level of distance from somebody when you're meeting them. Back to my friend who I was coaching, she was a close talker, to use Seinfeld. So she was a high talker and a close talker. She stepped into your personal space and she was like right there talking to you. And even though she was not a particularly big human being, it wasn't intimidating. It just made you uncomfortable around her. So she's talking fast, she's talking high, she's talking close, all at the same time. And you're like, I can't take this person seriously, and I don't want to spend time around them. So my advice is arm's length, unless you want to say something, as I said, conspiratorial or private or whatever, then you can lean in. Hey, so nice to see you, whatever. But proximity is really important. Now, there are people that particularly, I will say people that are bigger, that use this as an intimidation factor. Again, kind of a jerk move, but they will step in close and use their physical height and size as an intimidation factor in this relationship with you. My answer is you just back up. and let them chase you around the room, basically. Right? Every time you back up, they'll move in, you back up, they move in, you back up, they move in. Some of them figure it out what you're doing, but a lot of times you can end up getting chased around the room for a little while. But just keep the right distance. All right, that's key here. Maybe two other environments to think about physical elements of gravitas. One is a meeting room. Someone the table is rectangular, not circular. Circular doesn't have a head. It evokes, collaboration and no rank and stuff like that. And most of us have, a circular table in our offices because we want to have those kinds of meetings. But when you're at a formal, like a board table, the number one most powerful position at the board table is the head. The number two most powerful position is the foot. The number threes are the two sides at the middle of the table, and the number four power positions are at the corners. And so you can go into a room, you don't even need to know who's who. You can observe where they're sitting at the table, and you will know the pecking order of the people in that room. And so when you enter a room, you got to think about where you are in the pecking order effectively, but based on that, that's where you should sit. Now you go, geez, Jim, that seems kind of formal. You watch what happens when a super junior person sits at the head of the table and see what happens. It doesn't work. The visual cue is wrong for people. Again, this is super subliminal. People aren't thinking, oh, position one, position two, position three, position four. But I'm going to tell you, in their gut, in their perception of what's right and wrong, they absolutely feel this way. So if you want to control gravitas and you're in charge of the meeting, you've got to be at the head of the table. Sounds old-fashioned. I know it does, but it's true, and it is meeting the expectations that people have, said or unsaid, about where you as the leader are supposed to sit at that table. I used to, once in a while, when I'm trying to be more egalitarian, I would just sit at some random seat, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so I'm going to recommend that. Last one is on positioning is cocktail parties and receptions and stuff like that. There are two power positions in a reception. Position one, this is the secondary position. This isn't the best place to be. It's near the door. And that puts you in the position of being the greeter. You get to meet everybody. You welcome them. It is almost as though it is your reception. Now, many times it is our reception, and that's where you should be, is to welcome people in and so forth. The second position to be is near the bar. Why? Again, everybody's going to come by the bar. You have an opportunity to meet them. They get an opportunity to see you. The third, and this is more when you're ready to, let me call it, bring your group together, move to a corner where you bring people in. So door, cocktail bar, corner. The last one here is energy that I want to talk about on Gravitas. Leaders have an ability to energize others. But more important, Gravitas is we have an ability to take the energy out of a room. We have the ability to calm people. So when the crap hits the fan and like everything's going wrong, the leader is the one that goes, okay, great. Everything's going wrong. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? Who's going to do what? Like that level of calmness, that level of emotional control radiates throughout the organization. We've probably all worked with leaders that are amplifiers, right? They take energy and they amplify it and they jack up the organization when they do it. And it makes people crazy when you do that. What they're looking for us to do as leaders, if you want to exhibit gravitas on your team, in your organization, whatever, you need to be the calming influence that takes a little energy out of the problem and then solves it piece by piece. I have a word I use when, and I won't tell the whole joke, but when things go wrong, I've got a standard word that I go to, which is my calming word, which is, the word is fantastic. And usually I say it, fantastic. And what it means in my little head is everything is going wrong right now. Now, I don't tell anybody that. What I say is fantastic, even though I got another voice track in my head. So you might want to find a word that allows you to express your feelings in a way that presents the right image, but you want to be able to take the energy out of the room. Now, I got a client that we work with, Steve Walker. He's got a great line around our job as leaders is actually to strike the right level of stress in an organization. So I'm all about taking energy out of the room and being a calming influence in the room. But sometimes, you can go too far with that and you can turn this thing into a country club. So you got to run that right balance of an appropriate level of stress so people are motivated and moving, but not so much stress that they're going crazy and they're having high blood pressure and, drinking at home or whatever. So we need to take the energy out when things are going crazy, but we have to have the ability to add energy, add stress by being dissatisfied, for example, when it's not at the right level. So it's that little Goldilocks amount of stress that we're looking for. So that's Gravitas. I know there's a lot of sort of individual items in there, and hopefully you took a couple of notes on things that you might be able to pick up. But when you think about Gravitas, think about confidence. You belong here. Verbal. Do you have a clean, positive language? Do you use words well? How do you use your voice to make points? Your voice is a tool, a management tool. It's not just how things that squeak out of your mouth. It's a tool. How do you appear? How do you show up? If somebody met you for the very first time and you didn't say a word, what would they think? Would they say leader? Or would they say coder who probably just pulled an all-nighter, who hasn't had a haircut in 3 months? What is their reaction to you? How would they characterize you without a single word? Physical positioning and physical interaction is important to establish comfort for the other person. And then energy, putting it in when you need it. But largely our job is to take it out when the organization needs to calm down and focus. So I hope that was helpful. It's a little bit of a nebulous topic, but a lot of people struggle with it and they want to improve their gravitas and they don't know how. But these are a couple things that you might want to look at as you make efforts to improve your executive gravitas. So thank you everybody for coming. We will see you next time on the Lazy CEO podcast. Cheers. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.